Oh, okay. Get the bike.
Got it, I'm on it. I'll do that.
You ready? Did we hear from Andy?
Okay.
Oh,
I know.
Mark's online right there. Mark's online? Okay, well, then we'll get going. First off, everyone make sure your mics are on, so we don't get in trouble there.
On.
Mute yourself right now, Mark, until we get to that point.
Okay.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us this month for our Power Board meeting. I know we've got a full agenda and lots to do. And so, if we want to get started, everyone have a chance to look at the agenda.
Yep.
Questions, comments, changes? I get a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll go ahead and second that motion.
First and second. So Mark, you want to start us on the vote?
I'm sorry, is that me that you're referring to? I a little hard time hearing.
Two Marks.
All right. So am I ready to go? Sorry.
Hauser.
Okay, perfect.
Mark Hauser.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen.
Mark,
Yes.
1 second. We're trying to get agenda approved and minutes approved first.
Oh, gotcha. I am sorry. I didn't hear you. I apologize for that.
We want to start us.
Yeah, Spriggs, aye.
Saunders, aye.
Palmer, aye.
I can see your lips moving, but I don't hear Mark. Dinsmore, aye.
Hauser, aye.
There you go.
All right.
I'm having a hard time hearing. Are all the mics on there?
Maybe now it's again.
There we go. Now I can hear you.
Did it again. I did it first time. Okay. Minutes. Did everyone have a chance to look at the minutes? Comments, questions? Motion?
I'll go ahead and motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Todd motioned and Mark seconded. Andy, do you want to start us on a vote?
Palmer, aye.
Dick?
Aye.
Mark?
Hauser, aye.
Spriggs, aye.
And Dinsmore, aye. Okay, now on to new business.
Come on.
Rick, do you
Sounds
want
like
to,
fun.
or does Mark,
Yeah.
is Mark going to, okay, Rick.
Yeah, after our combined meeting last month, we had, I don't know, 2 or 3 meetings with UFS via Zoom and tried to incorporate some of the comments. And most of the slides Mark's gotten to present tonight are the same, but there's several that are different that he'll go over. And then if you got questions, feel free to ask either Mark or myself.
Are the slides he's showing the same ones that were sent to us?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So go ahead, Mark from afar.
Okay. Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you sound good.
All right. You see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. As Rick had mentioned, the first part of this slide deck is pretty much the same as what we went through earlier. Now, the feedback we had received was primarily well, there are two things. One was to look at a fourth scenario on the residential to create a new block. And you'll see that it's called scenario 4. So we have 4 residential scenarios. The other item was 2 of your general service commercial rates. We wanted to make the blocks similar in price. And so we went ahead and did that also. So I'm going to go through the first half of the slide deck fairly quick because I know that you've heard it before. And I think what we're looking for today is your direction and approval on these to forward these to city council, the rate designs. I think next week, Wednesday, sorry, for the city council meeting. But as you remember last time, we went through the financial projection and targets and the cost of service results. And the financial projection basically showed that we don't need any rate adjustments, rate increases. But the cost of service study showed that we should be modifying some of our rate structures. And that's what we went ahead and did. We did what's called revenue neutral rate designs. And these were the assumptions that we used in the development of our model. And let's see. The capital improvement plan, anywhere from $2 to $4 million a year. Inflation rates 5% in 23, and following up with kind of a normalized 3% after that. And then system growth around 3% a year. Right. Now, this is the results of the financial modeling without any rate changes. And you can see that when we look at the recommended minimum cash, which is around 7 to 8 million a year, your cash reserves without any rate changes are above that level. And that's our primary driver in looking at whether or not we should be adjusting rates. The other one is debt coverage ratio. Your low debt utility, your debt coverage ratio is not an issue. We target a minimum of 1.4, and your coverage ratio is anywhere from 3.84 is the lowest up as high as 6.5. Your operating income, target operating income, which is about 1.5 to 1.7 million a year, that's our upper boundary. We don't like to exceed that amount. All right, so we want to be our cash reserves, we want to be above the minimum. Our debt coverage ratio, we want to be above 1.4. And our target operating income, we want to be below that. And you can see in every one of these years, we are below it. The reason I want to stay below this number is when we exceed the target operating income, we're theoretically overcharging our existing ratepayers. Sometimes we have to do that. We have to do that when utilities found themselves, because they haven't adjusted rates in a while, they have to play catch up, but you don't have that situation. Financially, you guys are strong. This is the minimum cash reserve calculation. One thing to note here is the percent depreciation expense on the plants, about 32%. The system average is about 50%. So what that indicates to us is the age of your infrastructure is relatively new. Because it's relatively new, we feel you have less exposure to something unexpected happening to them. So we've assigned you the lowest risk rating that we assign utilities because of the age of your infrastructure. But the cash reserves, the minimum levels, is primarily driven on working capital needs, which is the timing difference between when you pay bills and get money from customers. And when we quantified all of it in 2024, the minimum reserve is about 7 million. Okay, and that changes each year depending on your capital improvement plan, depending on your purchase power costs and so on. And it goes up to about 8 million over time. Cost of service results. When we looked at your cost of service results, when we looked at your commercial, like your large commercial and your small commercial, you can see those are negatives. And that implies that we're probably, any rate adjustments that we should do, they should go down, but we're not doing that this time. But we are restructuring the rates. This is the monthly charges. This is the fixed charge that we charge to customers. You're currently charging $16.50. What that charge represents is when you have a meter installed on a customer's facility, The utility had the cost to install the meter, the responsibility to repair it, to replace it, to read it every month, to send the customer a bill, and to maintain the service drop, as well as a certain amount of the cost of getting a wire from the substation to the home. And when we quantified that in the cost of service study, it showed it should be about $20. Right. And so what you're going to see in our proposed rate structure is two scenarios that actually increases that $16.50 to the $20. But there is one weakness in charging the full cost of service, and that is that when we do an allocation study to identify how much of that distribution infrastructure, that wire, to go into the customer charge, we do what's called a minimum system analysis. And along with when we do that, there's a certain amount of capacity that is rolled into that minimum system that goes into the customer charge. And because the other part of it is rolled into the usage charge, we theoretically can be over collecting from small users unless we create another block in the rate. And in discussion with the board and council, it was decided to look at the creation of a smaller block rate that would be lower to help to remove that capacity component that's buried in that customer charge. Does that make sense? Right. Now, the other thing that we're looking at is your power cost adjustment, which is approaching 6 cents a kilowatt hour. Those costs have been coming down. And one of the directions we had was to try to true that up. But I didn't want to true the full 6 cents up back into the rates and bring the PCA down to zero. And the reason I didn't want to do that is because power supply costs over the course of the past year has been unusually high. And of course, we don't have a crystal ball and we can't predict the future, but they are stabilizing. And I didn't want to totally true up that power cost adjustment, but I did bring it down to 3 cents in the projection. In other words, I trued up 2.89 cents, rolled it back into the electric rates, and you'll see that in an upcoming slide. So one of the things that this slide shows us is that all the rate classes, the adjustments are revenue neutral. So no rate classes will see increases or decreases. However, customers within the class may see increases and decreases. So there will be some fluctuations within the class itself. So before I get into the actual rate designs and the different scenarios, primarily on residential, is there any questions? Guys, they're being easy on me tonight. This is the scenario that you saw in the last meeting, where we proposed 3 scenarios, and the customer charge would go up in the first scenario, currently at $16.50. Under scenario 1, we brought it to $17.50, then $18.50, and then $20 in scenario 3. One of the things that was the feedback was to break this 800 block into 2 and set a block between that. So what we did is we proposed a scenario 4 right here that kept the customer charge at $20. And we proposed a 400 block, 0 to 400, then 4 to 800, and after that, they're the same. Now, in doing that, what we did in the first 400 is we actually, I know it looks like we went from 8.5 cents to 10.2, but the reality of it is we lowered the energy rate by about a penny because we took the power cost adjustment that was 5.88 6.89, and we reduced or increased what's called a base, which theoretically would bring that power cost adjustment down to 3 cents in the way in which we did it. So the difference, that 2.9 cents, gets rolled into these energy components. Does that make sense? So if you added that to the 8.5 cents, you actually add about 11, a little over 11.2, 11.3 cents. So we're actually lowering the first block by about a penny per kilowatt hour. When the other thing that was directed was to do a frequency distribution on where customers fall into these different breakpoints. All right. So when we did that, I'll get into more of the frequency distribution a couple of slides from now, but in the summer, with this rate structure that we put together, and primarily focusing now on scenario 4, in the class that between 0 and 449 kilowatt hours, under scenario 4, they'd see about a 1% increase in cost. Their average usage was about 250 kilowatt hours in that block. The break-even point on the rate, because we increased the customer charge and decreased the first block of energy, is about 300 kilowatt hours. In other words, less than 300, they're going to see a little bit of a bump. Over 300, they're going to see a rate reduction. Now, between 500 and 1,000 kilowatt hours, they would see a 0.7% reduction. Then 0.2, then a negative 1.4. And the highest increase is in the higher users, which over 3,000 kilowatt hours, and this is in the summer, would see about a 3% increase in rates. Now, in the winter, customers at this lower usage level are not going to see any rate adjustment. It came out to be 0.1. And you can see that they're roughly the same. Other than that, over 3,000, they'd still see a 3% increase. Now, when you looked at how customers fell into the different blocks, in the summer, if you look at these number of accounts, out of the 10,000 residential ratepayers you have, about 14% of them fell into that first block. And remember, that first block in the summer will show that 1% increase. In January, in the winter, about 53% of your ratepayers in the winter fall into that 0 to 449 block, which you can see is basically no adjustment, 0.1. So this is the frequency distribution, and you can see that in the summer, most of your customers fall into the blocks that are less than 1,500 kilowatt hours. And if you look at 1,500 and less, you can see that probably most of those customers are going to see rate reductions in the summer and in the winter. So because the residentials was the one that caused the most discussion last time, is there any questions about what we did with the residentials, first of all? And secondly, is there any scenario you'd like to recommend to the city council?
Mark, I think one thing very interesting that when we did this, is if you look, and this is July of last year, 9% of our customers used 22% of the energy in that rate class.
Yeah.
Those two big top blocks. So
Yeah.
I think it's prudent to do, that's where a lot of our high expensive power is coming from. I think it makes sense to have the cost kind of follow that a little bit. Not that the 2 or 3% is a huge increase, but anyway, I kind of really surprised me that it was that distorted, if you will. I think our overall average ends up just under 1,500 for the summer, so.
And I think that was what we wanted to see, was kind of a breakdown percentage-wise, who uses what power and where they fall under percentages. So that's helpful for me to see the different groups and the percentages.
I agree with Todd. That's exactly what we wanted to see, and it's nice to see those numbers. So thank you for putting them together.
You know, one of the things, this is just my opinion, and obviously, whatever direction the board wants, but I really like scenario four, and I like scenario four for two reasons. One is you have a lot of seasonal customers. Increasing the customer charge to $20 will more accurately recover from those seasonal customers. Now, but your year-round ratepayers that are low users, because we lowered that first 400 kilowatt hour consumption rate, they're not going to see much of a change at all. Most of them are not going to see any increase. And I feel like that is a more accurate rate structure, and it follows what there's a certain drive in our industry that's going on, electric, water, wastewater, of affordability. So it lines up with the affordability criteria that the Energy Administration and different groups are trying to look for utilities to do to move toward affordability type rates. And that is one of them that does meet that criteria. I don't know if anybody else has a feeling on these different rate structures. Let me go back to them. This is the scenario four, and then these were the other three rates we reviewed last time.
I have to agree. I like the scenario four. I think that's what we were talking about last time, and why we wanted to see it is to see that effect kind of balanced by the different ratios, or by the different users, and the ones that heavily use it as well, and to see that kind of balance, so that the residential customers, the people that are here all the time, that are within that lower category, are not feeling that hit as much. So I tend to veer toward that scenario for now that I see those numbers as well.
Thank you, Mark. Is there any other feelings or comments? This is kind of the critical part of this, because the other ones are pretty consistent with what we presented last time and the feedback we'd received. But this is the one thing that we need input on. And Rick, do we need approval on these rates at the end of this meeting to submit them to the city council?
Yeah, that's actually the next agenda item. Basically, would be to recommend to the council to follow the presentation. And I did double check with Brittany to make sure we can handle the fourth block in the billing system. She said it's not a problem. I like how the results of that came out with the fourth block. I originally wasn't a big fan of adding more complexity, but I think it fits the scenario quite well, and I think accomplishes the goals going into it. Again, those, and then like he shows there on that bottom line, the PCA would go down to the 3 cents right now, and then depending on what power costs do, it would fluctuate from there.
Did you pull an actual to see what would happen on someone's bill?
What, if you can go back to your comparison, I guess 2 more slides up, Mark? Nope, the other direction, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, so what that second column, it says average kilowatt hour in the usage group. And I think that 0 to 449 really should be 499. Just a typo there. And so that was the average usage in that group. And then that's the change in the billings for that usage level. So the 250 to 271 under each of those scenarios.
And there'd be a 1% adjustment. In the winter, they wouldn't see any, basically.
Yeah, we didn't do a presentation. I know they're there somewhere in all their fancy spreadsheets is what the dollar amount goes with those percentage changes.
Rick, what would be helpful for council is if you did one scenario for each of these on scenario 4. Like grab a person's bill, scratch out their name and say, okay, their bill was kilowatts from 0 to 449 and this is what their bill did.
We could probably run hypotheticals through our model, Rick, if you wanted.
Okay, yeah, we could add a few slides that way, but
Well, I think especially in the 2,500 to 2,999 and the 3,000 and over, that's a big difference between scenario 3 and scenario 4. Those are the biggest differences. Well, I guess in 1,500 to 2,002, there's also a pretty big difference.
Yeah, that went down though.
Yeah, but I'm just saying you would be able to see how much it went down.
Because my concern is, I mean, you're looking at those rates. Rates are going to go up. The bill's going to go up
for
for.
the bigger users, yes.
I think the only one it's really going to. Well, I don't even know if it would go. I want to know.
So if you had a 300,
I don't know if it would go down for someone even in that lowest one, because currently they're being charged 0.085 if you're under 800 kilowatts, right? And that's going to go up to 0.102.
but the PCA
PCA is
compensates that the opposite direction. So
Yeah.
that result,
Break even was 300 kilowatt hours is the break even on it. In other words, at 300 kilowatt hours, that would be the break even point.
so maybe go back a couple slides that
Okay,
shows.
so yeah, so I'm looking at compare current to the scenario 4. Okay, I see that. But yeah, I guess that's where it's like, okay, I see it going up and then I see it coming down, but where that actually would fit dollar for dollar is
Well,
what.
and like I said, if the one that says a 3% increase, say you had a $300 power bill, it's going to be $9. And if you had a 1% decrease, it's going to be a $3 decrease. So in the overall scheme of things, I don't see that. We're never going to get it matched perfect. And so that's the difference. If you go back one slide, Mark, you can see it. The one that shows the scenario 1, 2, and 3 there. So if you take under the current, that first block is 0.085, and you see the PCA is
Yeah.
5889. If you take that 2889 and add it to the 8.5 cents, it gets you to the 11,389. So, like I say, it becomes more of as what there is actually being paid. It's basically a wash.
But Rick, if you look at if you go back to the percentage one, it's a pretty small percentage. If you went with scenario 3, you'd have, 4.1% of the users would get in, or 250 out of 50.
No, this is kilowatt hour usage. The actual in the summer, the winter is probably a better look at it. But if you look at the summer, about 1,400 customers fall in that block.
So
In
what
the
percent?
winter, about
14%.
over 50.
Okay, so
50%.
14% of the customers are going to be affected with scenario 3 more.
Correct.
And they're your
versus
smaller customers, which was part of the concern.
yeah. I just wanted to make sure we're clear that
Yes.
14% would be affected on scenario 3, but only 9% would be affected on scenario 4. The difference is scenario 4 is their bills are big already and they're going to get 3% bigger.
But at the same time, like I said, they are dramatically by far the bigger users that are causing us to purchase the more expensive power. So to me, it correlates, pay to play kind of thing, it follows your impact on the system. So
Which is what we're trying to do when we set that 0 to 800, 800 to
Correct.
15, 15
Correct.
up.
So-
We're just,
and again, no matter what you do, you'll always, it's going to affect different people different ways.
and it also comes, these are outside influences that are dictating what we're having to do for our city.
Correct.
I think the worst case scenario, not the worst case, but in that lower block in the summer, I think some customers could see if they're around 300, like 2 to 300, maybe like a 60 to 70 cent increase in their bill, and that's probably on the high side. But we'll run that for the council next week.
It's next week, the council.
Next
Our,
week, yeah.
our current plan is, if you're comfortable with moving this recommendation to the council, as we had presented on the May 12th meeting the week from tomorrow is the plan. So again, if you're not comfortable, then we can take hold another meeting.
I like scenario 4. I think it makes sense with what's been discussed.
I agree. I like scenario 4 as well.
Any other questions on the residential side of it? Mark, why don't you finish through with the commercial real quick and just show us what you've done there and Mark?
Yeah, sorry, I had to. I can only see part of my screen because of there it goes. This is the small commercial rate. And what we did here, and again, it was based on the feedback that we had received. The customer charge, we increased from 22.50 to 25.50. We lowered the power cost adjustment by that 2.9 cents and rolled it into this energy rate. And so the energy rate is really a little bit less than what it currently is. Because if you rolled in the 2.9 cents to that 6.9, and then the demand charge, we just kind of rounded that up to 10.75. When we looked at the impacts of customers at different load factors, and load factors, if you remember, is a ratio of a customer's peak usage to their average usage. It's kind of a measurement of the capacity factor or efficiency factor of a customer. And somebody with a lower efficiency rating is going to see maybe a 1% increase. That's at a 20% load factor. The break even is probably about 47, 48% load factor. Above that, they'd see a slight reduction in their bill, but it's really modest, the changes. Anywhere from a 0.5% reduction to a 1% increase. Overall, it's no rate change for the class.
And the higher the load factor, the easier the customer is to serve.
Yeah.
Basically, it's on and they turn on and just stay there. 24/7 would be 100% load factor. Whereas,
Then we have,
go ahead.
I would say then the next one is the large commercial rate. And this one, we took the customer charge from 92.50, we rounded up to 100. Again, the energy charge, we went to 9604, same as in the small commercial. The demand charge, we increased from 1115 to 1165. And overall, that's no rate change for the customers in this class. And from a load factor perspective, the break-even points are right around that 45%. And then they'd see reductions. And the change in rates is about 0.75% increase to about a 0.5% decrease. So again, very modest. Then we have the commercial EV charging rate. This is a new rate. And we set it with a customer charge of $35, an energy rate of 10.8 cents, a demand charge of $5.45. That's primarily to recover distribution investments. And then, of course, the power cost adjustment is the same. So this is a new rate. There isn't anybody currently on it, but I think you have quite a few different inquiries on charging rates, don't you, Rick?
Correct. We have the Electrify America station in front of Walmart. That's the only one that would probably right now fit on that. We got some proposals for adding at some commercial locations, and even since we met last, Tesla's been asking about a location on the system as well. So I think this is going to be, it will be good to have in place before we kind of get behind things. So with all the government incentives, kind of everybody and their dog wants to do this right now.
Was that pretty comparable to what others are charging elsewhere, since we don't?
I guess I'd have to defer to Mark. I'm not aware of any of the other local utilities that have a charging rate. I know it's been discussed, but
In Heber City, I think we put one in place. The rate structure is comparable to most that I've seen. The only ones that vary is ones that are on time of use, where they have an energy rate for on-peak and off-peak usage. But the distribution recovery charge is typically around that. It's normally between $4 and $8, and you're at $5.45. Again, that's just the distribution recovery. All the power supply related costs are recovered in this energy rate.
Do we need to look at the impact fees and address this?
that's a whole nother cousin animal. Weird. So we actually have ICP. They're working on updating our capital facilities plan. Once that's done, then we would look at the impact fees on that. So that I would say would probably be 5-6 months out before we get to
Okay.
would be my guess. And the other, and I don't think Mark has a specific slide for it in here, other than it may show up on those others, is that the solar buyback rate, if you will. Yeah, it's on those other tables. We would go from 4 cents to 6.5 cents to better reflect the costs.
I don't have it on here.
Oh, if you go back to your tables there that show the scenarios, there's a line there, Mark. Yeah, right.
Oh, this one right here.
Yeah, the renewable metering credits. So we're at 4 now, and ties into one of the next agenda items is redoing that policy. So
we give them more? There's more money paid back?
yeah, because they're investing that would defer what we would have to go out and get. That's the idea, and that's part of what the cost of service is showing, that we probably should be in that range. So, and then the only other minor one, I think there's a footnote on the large commercial sheet, is that we would recommend moving steel structures to the large commercial. But that's something I think Jeremy and I will discuss with them and figure out how to transition. It may not be just all at once, but we'll figure out a way to transition. There's really no reason they should have a special unique rate, so we'll work on doing that, but I think that's more administrative than, in this whole process. So those are the only other two things that I had on that, so. Any questions for Mark or myself, or? Did we address your concerns?
think that
Like I
was
said, we had a
helpful for
few
me.
meetings trying to get there and bounce different ideas, so.
I think you definitely addressed our concerns. I'm satisfied with what I see.
And then for the council next week, we can pull, I know Rachel, she pulled various ones from different locations, and we could probably just give Mark a list of some different ones. Or we could do, at this different levels and just add a dollar amount before and after kind of thing. Does that work, Mark?
That works. Yeah, definitely.
That did make sense, though, with your example of the $300 bill going up $9. It helps because I can't do simple math like that, so I appreciate that. But yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Gives us a good idea anyway. I actually feel comfortable with moving forward with recommending number 4 is my thoughts personally, and keeping it the way that it is on the small commercial and large commercial. That's,
I do as well.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think that with scenario 4, I mean, and really the amounts are relatively negligible. I mean, $300, looking at $9, and that's even less for the majority of customers. And so I think scenario 4 would be ideal.
Yeah, it seems fine with me. Scenario 4 makes it a little bit more consideration for the small user. And in general, the larger users are going to pay, if there's going to be an increase, they're going to pay a little bit more. Seems equitable. And everything appears that because we're taking the power cost adjustment down, it's revenue neutral.
For the
Now,
department as a whole.
what happens with power rates in the future, if that PCA has to be adjusted, then
Well,
we're not in control of that.
Yes, and I think this example was that we experienced this last year was Wisdom when this was established. It was before I got here, so probably approximately almost 6 years ago was when this was originally implemented, and it did just exactly what it's supposed to do to protect the utility. And then I'm hopeful that I don't think they're going to. Power wholesale rates are going to go down to where they were a year or two ago, but I'm hoping they will moderate some, and that gives us the 3 cents. Hopefully, a year from now might be 2 or something, and so it'll adjust downward accordingly. So, but like I say, I think Mike's the last Mohican from that original power board, and I think they had a lot of wisdom in doing that. A lot of good foresight there. So, and then I really think a year from now we'll probably have UFS look at this again and make sure we're on target, or if something changes dramatically that we're not seeing right now, we can certainly pull that trigger earlier.
So are you looking for 2 motions, or can be combined into one motion?
What I put on your agenda was kind of 4 bullet points. to basically recommend to the council to accept. And I tried to highlight the four main areas: the PCA adjustment, revise the schedule, the renewable
So
credit.
can we do that in one motion, or do we need to
I think
do-
so.
Okay, so if you're looking at the agenda, we need a motion that addresses the PC rate, the rate schedules for residential and commercial, the renewable resource credit rate change, and the commercial EV charging rate.
Does
That
that
make sense?
That's what I'm going to put on the agenda, Tara, to put on the agenda for council next week.
So the PCA base rate is scenario 4, is that?
How we were bringing that.
PCA rate, changing it down.
That adjustment would happen in any of the scenarios.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
But it may not hurt, your recommendation for the residential is to use scenario 4,
yeah.
since there's multiples in this presentation. So,
All right, I'll go ahead and make a motion to adjust the PCA base rate as presented, revise the rate schedules for the residential and commercial rates as presented with using scenario 4 for the residential, adjust the renewable resource credit rate as presented, and adopt a commercial EV charging rate as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, Todd made the motion, Mark seconded. Andy, do you want to this on a vote?
Palmer, aye.
Dick,
Saunders, aye.
Mark,
Hauser, aye.
Todd,
Aye.
and Dinsmore, aye. Hey, thank you.
so thank you, Mark.
I was going to say,
Mark
Mark,
B,
do you
you
want
can-
to, if you want to stay on, you can stay on, but I'm sure you've got other.
We'll
Thank
be,
you, Mark.
Mark,
I think I'll go have dinner, but hey, thank you so much for your time. I enjoyed working with you guys and the staff and council. You've been great. I love the feedback I got. Thank you so much.
and we'll be
Thank you.
getting with you on the details for next week's meeting. It might be a little bit later, so get a good night's sleep the night before.
Thank you for your work, Mark. Appreciate
All
you.
right, thank you.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, next item of business, new business, which is item 3, C.
See if this works. Oh, it did. Hope it did. Okay, this next item, we're not looking for any action tonight. I just wanted to go over proposed changes to our renewable resource policy, which is everybody on it, or addressed by the policy is rooftop solar. One of the triggers, there's two main triggers for this recommended change, is one, we had set, I think it was 2.5 megawatt sum total limit. I think we're at 2.4 something right now, so we're bumping up against that limit. As stated in the policy, the other big one was the buyback rate that we previously talked about in the. So my plan tonight is just to kind of show you have the, I guess in Google Docs it comes out as a green line, not a red line. You'll notice most of the changes are in green. So the first one's just the the ordinance. That's just date changes. One of the other, and so this is where we'd go from the 2.5 megawatts to the 4 megawatts. We did add this in between Mike Roosh and I. Somehow his purple turned to gray when I made a couple edits. So the gray is also a new area in this one. And I couldn't get it back to the Mike's color on the red line. But basically what this is doing is requiring companies that want to do business within this Washington City to come in and meet with us. This is the installers, the company selling the systems. So we can at least have some contact with them and so they understand our program. The goal is hopefully they'll communicate that to their customers more effectively than we've ran into. Some of the current ones do a good job and some of them don't do quite such a good job. So Mike's actually met with a couple of them and the feedback so far has been positive. So I think it'll help them understand the process of how to get a permit and the whole 9 yards. And then also Dixie's on board with kind of combining the processes as far as getting permits and stuff. Their policy is different than ours as far as how it works with the buyback and all that. But as far as getting your permit into the city and getting through that process, we've worked with them to try to make it as common as possible so the companies don't have too big a time north or south of the river. I added this little green paragraph 1I, basically it doesn't prevent a larger system than 16 kilowatts, but it allows us the option to look at it as a case-by-case basis. We're starting to see larger and larger systems, and in most cases it hasn't been a problem, but when we plan for a subdivision, or Mike typically uses 6 to 7 kilowatts on average for a home. So if they come in with a 20, 25, 30 kilowatt system, that really could, and you get 2 or 3 of those on the same transformer, that could cause us some problems. And so this would just provide basically a trigger that we might need to look at this application a little closer, where it's going, what other solar might be in the area, and those kind of things. So it's doesn't prevent it, and then if we start on the surface to see some issues or concerns, then it gives us the right to require additional study effort if needed. The 120%, I just added a couple words to make sure that refers, so it's clear that that's an energy percentage. We're starting to see more battery systems, and so this sentence here on this paragraph basically just says anything with an energy storage system, which is battery, has to comply with the UL 9540, which they all should be, but some of the systems that we've seen come through do not have that rating. And so we wanted to, as these policies evolve over time, it's usually in a response to something that you thought you had addressed, but you find out you hadn't quite.
With that, Rick, as far as the install, do you have farther down also disposal of those systems anywhere in here? They're complying with any? It's well outside of the utilities purview. So it's just like if you bury your car battery, that's a no-no, but yeah. Particularly we added this to install or upgrade the following, if you looked at the original language, it was all stuffed in one long paragraph, and I broke it into more of a bullet point format. Again, the rapid shutdown's an industry standard that they need to comply with now, so again, just highlighting the ESS, the energy storage systems. This is a Utah requirement that they have to have a smoke detection equipment, so it's just putting that out. They should already know that. And then particularly in the older part of town where we have services that are 30 and 40 years old, they try to come in and cobble stuff together that
quite frankly, I don't think it's very safe for the customers. So if it's not up to current standards on their service, they may be required to upgrade that service to current standards before they put all this new equipment on.
So if they have a screw-in fuse box, you don't want them doing solar until they get a,
They need to, yeah, get into the, and for the most part, this hasn't been a big issue, but like I say, there's a few that I know if I was that homeowner, the little cost difference to get it right would give them a whole lot of peace of mind. So that's what that's trying to address. 10I is probably the third biggest item. What we would like to propose, and I think we had some discussion on this a while back, is to have the initial review of these installations go to an approved third-party reviewer. What we've been doing recently for all battery systems, we've been sending it to a third-party reviewer. There's, I think, 3 or 4 other utilities that I'm aware of that do it this way. So basically, they would take their drawings, submit it to an approved reviewer. Once they're happy, then they would start the city building process or permitting process. The one we've been using is very up to speed on the solar installations and the constantly changing requirements between the state and the NEC. And so it keeps, and I'll cover it in the general report, but we had sponsored a training class that was very helpful. I learned several things that I look for now that I wasn't aware of. Not huge things, but again, they specialize in that, and they need to, and then basically they would pay that third-party reviewer directly. Right now we're having to funnel all that in and out of the city, and it becomes kind of cumbersome to do that.
Is something they do prior to submitting the application?
Yes, that's the goal, is by the time we get it, the building department looks for, the structural analysis, the smoke detector, is it there? And again, that should be caught as part of the reviewer. We're going to look for, double check that there's a production meter. The city review should be reduced to a quick process at that point. And that's why it's not just any third-party reviewer, it's one that we would feel comfortable with. Right now, there's only one that would be on that list initially until somebody brings somebody forth, and they'd have to have similar credentials to do that. Again, at an absolute minimum, I would want any battery systems or ones with generators to go through that review. And this particular company, they charge like $95 to review a simple system. So again, we're talking systems that are $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. It seems pretty minimal to, I want to get it right, but at the same time, I don't have the time and the staff to stay up to speed on every gory detail of solar installation. So that's the reason there. On those, again, the item 4 there kind of ties into that 16 kilowatt output, AC output. Just to give us the ability, if there's a system we're not comfortable with, it can be studied on the system before it goes in. I added the 69 kV or distribution in case some large installation wants to come in. I don't think we have any interest to hosting a solar farm within our city. One, I don't think the land would be approved. I don't think there's that much empty space to do it. But that's the reason for those, is just to protect us on those. Then down here on the payments, this is where the 6.5 shows up. And then I added the note that that could be changed by Power Board and City Council approval from time to time, either up or down. And then I added paragraph 3 to try it. We still get questions or comments of people thinking that we're a net meter policy utility, and we're not. And so that's an attempt to let them know on a month-by-month basis they're basically made whole. Anything they've sent back to us, they'll get credited for, but an extra kilowatt hour in January can't be carried over to credit against something in July. And so that's my attempt is, and you guys can help me determine if I accomplish that, was to make it more clear of how our policy works. Again, that goes back to a meeting with installers so we can explain this so they can understand it, and hopefully they communicate that to their customers. That's an attempt to, there's some utilities that actually require each customer to come in and meet with the utility. And that would be, I guess, the next step if it became a significant problem. But again, that potentially chews up quite a bit of staff time that we just are pretty small staff. So this paragraph is to address, say you got a duplex, a triplex, somebody in the middle wants to put solar on their unit and the meter's on the far end of the building. They need to get an easement, some sort of written permission that they can put conduits basically through that other unit. And, you know, that they need to comply with all the codes for fire penetrations. And again, this has happened a few times, and so that's why I thought, well, we might as well put it in so it's up front.
That's not covered in the CCNRs or in the initial easements when those units are built for public utilities?
It may be, but I want to make sure it's up to them, because we had one that they were wanting us to go get the permission from the adjacent property owner, and said, no, that's not our job. Again, so a lot of these items are weird little things that have popped up over the last couple of years that at least we can point back. No, right here it says that it's your job to get that and prove to us that it's okay. I approved one this last week, but it was an end unit on, happened to be the same side where the meter was, so they didn't have to cross anything. It was probably about 3 or 4 years ago, we actually had somebody that had put panels on the adjacent unit's roof. Didn't go over well when that all came to light. So again, you learn over time. This last is just requesting them to provide pictures of the existing services, things like that, so we can make the review process go a little smoother. And, you know, provide details. You know, we've got some people that'll turn in plans that they try to do it in like 4 pages, and others that will send 50 pages. And so and probably ought to be about 10 or 15. It ought to be in the middle there somewhere where we have enough information, or the reviewer, to feel comfortable with what they're doing, and but at the same time, not. Sometimes I think if they give us more pieces of paper, it'll be easier. I don't know, or we won't look at it closer. And then the very last change is just put it in part of the policy instead of a separate page, that their document needs to be notarized, and we need to have the original in hand. So again, unless you have some specific feedback, or right now, this would come, my plan would come before you at our it would be June meeting, for your recommendation to the council. So in that period of 4 weeks or so, send me any comments that you might have, and we can come up with the next version of this. And then hopefully then the council could approve it at one of their council meetings in June. It ties in with some other stuff that the building department's doing, that they're would like to have all that in place by July 1st is their goal. I mean, it's not a hard deadline, but it would just tie in with some other stuff that they're doing. So those, the three big things is the KW increase, total limit. We haven't seen any issues on the system, so I don't see any reason why we wouldn't move forward with that. The rate, buyback rate change, and then the requiring the third-party reviewer are the three biggest ones. Most of the rest is wordsmithing, and hopefully I made it better, not worse. Sometimes you can write
So
too
Rick,
much.
increasing it from the 2 to the 4, how long did it take us to get to the 2? I mean, is this something this isn't gonna last just 6 months, this will last for a year or two, and
I'm guessing that should get us 18 months to 2 years.
Okay.
Who knows, with the increased buyback rate, that may, I would suspect that'll encourage some people. But again, they're gonna get their best bang for the buck if they offset the 12 or 13 cents that they're paying. That needs to be their target, and that's the goal. We're not trying to create solar farms for people to, pay their mortgage off. That's not the intent. I don't think they have enough roof space to do that, and generally. So that one's more, at this point, FYI, read it. Let me know if you got comments. And then I think it should be positive for the customers and the installers. Hopefully there's a couple little hoops they'll have to do, but I think in the end I was talking to one and they said they appreciated it because that way they knew everybody would kind of be on similar playing fields, if you will. So. Any questions on that at this point?
all right, on to item number 4, regular business.
Okay, I know, well, we're actually not doing as bad as I thought we might there, so just to give you a report on where we're at on a few things. This is just a scan of a certificate that we got from APPA, basically saying that we exceeded the 5-year average for reliable service, meaning we had less outages on average per customer. So that was a nice thing to get from APPA. So, and we use a software called Reliability Tracker that we put all our outages in. So the software tracks everything and the number of customers affected and all that kind of stuff. And it calculates all these different metrics that are used in the industry. So that was a really good thing. Again, I'm proud of our system and our crew keeping it up and running well. Report on some projects. Hang on just one second. Forgot to grab all my notes. I'll back up just a little bit. Our peak for April was just a little over 24.5 megawatts, which you can probably guess it was Saturday when it was hot. So we had a little spike there and we're back down to where this time of year it kind of jumps around quite a bit. Wheeler completed an annual inspection and adjustment of our generators, so we should be good to go for this upcoming run season as far as we know at this point in time. With the gas that we pre-purchased, we expect they'll start running June 1st and pretty much will run every day until the end of September. And Jake and Tyler will be the main ones operating those units. And I did mention that we did sponsor a solar training class. We held it up at the community center. We invited, we had, what was it, 5 from our department. We had quite a few from the building department. We invited St. George, Hurricane, Santa Clara. We invited Dixie. I don't think they had anybody that showed up. And then we did have one installer participate in that. So it was really good, very informative. And I think we'll probably make that kind of an annual tradition, if you will. It costs a little bit of money, but I think it was well worth it to get everybody on the same page. And it was good to hear what's worked at other utilities and what struggles they have, that we can all learn from each other. So that was really good and well attended. That was probably the worst part, was we ended up in a small room with a lot of people. So projects, the Grapevine, Councilman Coates is all too familiar with this project. This will be a future, well, actually not too distant future, new trailhead for the Grapevine trail, and then we'll also have our new Grapevine substation site. And so the first step is to relocate the tortoise fence, and I just, nothing too exciting picture-wise, but just to show you, we'll be moving the gate into the habitat up to this point. And I haven't been up there for a few days. You may be able to address more of where they're at.
I think they're pretty close to where your pictures are. They're not.
Okay.
They're moving pretty slow.
Okay. So they've got some of the corner posts in, and hopefully in the next week or two they'll have that wrapped up, that part. The pre-bid for that project's tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So, and that'll be a project in conjunction with the developer, Power Department, and Parks Department. It's kind of a combined effort there. So it's going to be a really neat facility. Of course, I think it's neat because there'll be a substation there, but I'm in the minority. I'm pretty sure when people see it go up. But exit 11, the main activity is there. There's this pole just on the south side of the freeway. You've seen pictures the last, I think, 2 meetings of the foundation going in, and excuse me, the pole being set and those kind of things. And so this is the end product. So I think it turned out really nice. I guess the only difference is this pole here on to the left is no longer there now. It's out of his yard as well. And the resident that lived there was really good to work with. And so it turned out good. That was one of the main components, if you will, that for the UDOT project. The old wood pole was up to the north just a little ways and had guy wires, and they wanted to get rid of the guy wires, and that's why they went with the steel pole option, which from our standpoint is actually better for us. So, but I think it turned out really as clean as you can put a large pole in the front of somebody's yard. So moving on to the next, our main focus for pretty much the whole department right now is getting the Main Street substation back online before the summer season hits. This is just the crew setting one of the bigger poles there on be the south side of the substation. And crew's just setting that. And this was the pole that they were setting there. If you drove up there now, this old wood pole's gone and all the conductors have been moved over to this one. And you can see it there now. The conductors are to that, and the wood pole used to sit right here. So I think I got a couple. This was actually pictures today, and then so they cut that transmission line into two pieces, and we'll have this side will feed from the Purgatory source, and this one will feed from the river substation source, or our south source, and they'll come in here, and they're working on dead ending those conductors, and they're just starting to put those drops in, and so that project's coming along well. The testers, the relay testers, will be here next Monday, so I'm hoping within the next 2 weeks to have it back online and this whole switching configuration functional. So got to beat the heat. And then our challenging project, we did a bore across the freeway for, it's in conjunction with that future substation on the north side of this. It'll come underneath the freeway just north of exit 13 and tie into the new commercial area and all the residential that's going there. And so this is south looking north. And they originally were hoping to do the bore in one shot, and they were unsuccessful. They've hit a lot of really hard rock in there. And so then they were able to come up in between the northbound on-ramp and the main line northbound road, and then they had to shoot from here back to that location. And so I think the next picture probably shows it a little better. So these conduits are coming from the north, and these are coming from the south, and then they married these together in between I'm just north of the on-ramp where the picture was taken from. And that's the conduits on the south, and then they've put it all back. So those are our main projects. That one was supposed to take about a week, 10 days, and it was been over a month. So that rock it's been quite the challenge for them. So for the renewable applications, we only had 5 in April, which is similar to what last April was. And then we've already covered our basic plan moving forward there. We've got the banners up around for Cotton Days, which was last weekend, and then this upcoming weekend's the Ironman. So you saw a mix of banners around. I think that's all as far as the local. If you want me to move on to the UAMPS, I can. Got any questions?
Questions?
Okay, UAMPS, we actually had our meetings down here at the Red Lion for April, which was kind of nice. Didn't have to travel for a change. But we did make a forward market purchase for January through March of 24. Small amount, but that'll help secure or minimize the volatility for that period next year. We're still working with UAMPS to try to secure another. We originally were hoping for a 5-year block of power, but the suppliers weren't willing to go out that far, and so they've kind of regrouped, and we're looking at maybe a 2 to 3 year purchase instead that would start after. It'd be basically April of 24 for 2 or 3 years. So we're working with UAMPS on that. On the Central St. George Area Transmission Project, probably the biggest thing on that is we're working with Dixie and UAMPS to try to get a bulk electric system or BES exemption, which would be a precursor to helping us loop the Area 138 kV lines, which would increase reliability. If you end up in the BES, there's a lot of reporting and baggage that comes with that we're hoping to try to avoid if we can. On our Nebo Payson project, as reported previously, as a PMC, we decided to run it differently than it historically has, basically 24/7. For the most part, in April, they only had 3 starts on the unit. Previously, they'd turn it off and on every day. And so it had, not surprisingly, the highest production of any April since the plant was constructed because of the way we're changing how we're operating that plant. There is, they call it the ozone transport rule, and you've probably seen the haze rule for some of the coal plants. And so they're monitoring the requirements of that, and right now they feel like they can comply with those requirements, but it's something to be wary of what the EPA requirements are at that location. The really good news is the Red Mesa. I think I reported last month that the Red Mesa started producing mid-March, the solar project there on the Navajo reservation. It's been doing really well. Right now, I just wish we had a little bit more. Hindsight's 2020 compared to steel, which is still struggling to get the panels for that project. So that one we have like 7 megawatts in. The Red Mesa, we only have 1 megawatt. So I wish it was flipped around, that we had the one with the higher subscription online. So UAMPS is working with the developer to try to sort through that, but it doesn't look like it'll be online until first quarter of next year at this point, unfortunately. UAMPS got the responses for their geothermal RFP, and they're in the process of sorting through all that data and the proposals, and so they don't really have any recommendations at this point, but they're starting. I think it was Power Engineers is working with them on that. The Zion Solar project looks good. It's one that has a 4-hour battery with it. The challenge there is due to transmission constraints. The earliest COD right now is showing at 2028. They'd originally hoped at 2026, but Rocky Mountain says they have to do these improvements, and it'll take at least that long to allow it to come online. The 2 wind project, Horse Butte and Pleasant Valley, they had pretty good months. The one had a capacity factor of 41%, which is pretty high for that installation. The Pleasant Valley was probably more typical in the 23% range, meaning it's basically there 23% of the time. And last but not least, on the CFPP project, the main thing there is, kind of sound like a broken record month to month, is the COLA application. All that work is going on at or under budget and on time for submittal to the NRC at the end of this year. The continuing challenge is getting the subscription. They're working with several. So I don't have anything super, we've got somebody signed up at this point, but they're working on 2 or 3 different avenues that hopefully will be successful. So, and then I did also, and I thought I had it brought up here, but apparently I didn't. UAMPS is, if I can find it here, is doing a monthly report on their Uh, Just kind of a summary of all the different meetings that, I think we included that in the packet, didn't we? And so take a look at that. If you got questions, I thought it was a good addition of what they've started to do. And maybe I didn't do.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, it'll look like that. I'm sorry. Apologize. I thought I had it all teed up, but that gives you some other bullet points you can look at, and you can even see some of the information on, like, the Hunter project is in here that we're not part of, but again, there's that ozone transport rule on that one, and Rocky Mountain Power kind of gave them a bit of a surprise and said that they're going to retire that plant early. Those kind of things. So even if it's not a project that we're in, some of that is interesting to at least know what's going on in the industry. And again, as resources come offline, no matter the fuel source, it makes things more scarce and can affect us indirectly. Or I guess it affects us directly, but through the market pricing mechanism. So, and that's my report. I appreciate all your support and input, and again, feel free to reach out if you have questions on any of this or anything in general. So,
Okay, thank you, Rick. Any questions, comments? Okay. Next meeting is June 6th. 6th, so mark your calendars for that, and a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
And second,
I'll second.
Mark first and Andy second. So Todd, would you start us?
Aye.
Dick,
Saunders, aye.
Palmer, aye.
Mark,
Howser, aye.
Dinsmore, aye. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you. Thanks, Rick.